Dr. Caleb Reed prided himself on being a pioneer. Ordinary plastic surgery was for amateurs. What he did was reinvention. For the right price, he could make anyone beautiful, young, perfect, or even someone else entirely. At first, he worked with willing clients, people desperate to sell their faces for money. But soon demand outgrew supply. That's when he stopped asking. The rich wanted youth. The criminals wanted new identities. The insecure wanted perfection. Caleb provided it all. His lab, hidden in an underground facility, housed preserved faces. Beautiful, flawless, stolen. But his latest masterpiece was different. Naomi Sinclair, young, stunning, the kind of face that could make men obsess. A powerful politician wanted her beauty for his mistress. So Caleb's men took her, strapped her down, cut away her face while she screamed into the darkness. Her new owner paraded around in Naomi's stolen beauty. Meanwhile, Naomi, faceless, voiceless, forgotten, was dumped into a mass grave of previous victims. But this time, something went wrong. Naomi woke up, and she wasn't done fighting. Caleb's best client, Senator Howard Crane, couldn't stop admiring his new woman. Naomi's face fit perfectly on his young mistress, but 3 nights later, she started screaming. "I hear her! I hear her in my head!" she shrieked. Her fingers scratched at her own face like it was burning. Caleb tried to assure them psychological side effects were common, but Crane wasn't convinced. Days later, Caleb received a call. Crane and his mistress were found dead. Their faces? Ripped off. Panic spread among Caleb's elite buyers. Some returned their new faces, terrified. Others demanded protection. And in the darkness, Naomi watched. She had clawed her way out of the grave, her skinless body stitched together with rage. And she was coming for them all. Dr. Caleb Reed sat in his sterile office, reviewing the autopsy photos of Senator Crane and his mistress. Their faces, gone. Not sliced off like his surgical work. Ripped, torn, devoured. "This isn't possible," he muttered. Once a face was removed, it was just flesh, dead tissue, nothing more. But deep down, an old fear crept in. Had he gone too far? Had something unnatural taken hold of his stolen work? His thoughts were interrupted by his assistant, Greg, rushing in, sweating, pale. "Dr. Reed, another one." It happened again. Caleb followed Greg down the cold, fluorescent-lit hallway of his underground lab. In one of the operating rooms, a corpse lay strapped to the chair. It was Madeline Kent, a wealthy socialite who had just purchased a new face. Her skin had been peeled away, revealing raw muscle and bone. Her mouth was frozen open in a silent scream of terror. But the worst part, her original face, the one Caleb had removed, was stitched back onto her skull, upside down. Caleb's breath hitched. The dead weren't just dying. Someone, or something, was reclaiming their stolen skin. Naomi had never believed in curses, but now she was living one. She felt every face that had been stolen, every cut, every stitch, every scream. When Dr. Reed's men had taken her, she thought she would die, but something inside her had refused to let go. Now she was connected to them, the stolen ones. Their pain called to her. She followed the trail of suffering straight to Madeline Kent's mansion. When Naomi arrived, Madeline was sobbing in her bedroom, staring at her reflection. "Get out of my head," Madeline whimpered. Naomi stepped from the shadows, her mutilated face hidden by a black veil. "You stole my face," Naomi whispered. "It doesn't belong to you." Madeline screamed. No one heard her. The next morning, she was found with her face torn away. And Naomi, she felt stronger. This wasn't just revenge. It was reclamation. Dr. Reed ordered his guards to increase security. He couldn't afford to lose more clients. His underground facility was his pride and joy, walls lined with faces in preservation chambers, stored like priceless artifacts. But that night, the alarms blared. Greg, his assistant, sprinted into Caleb's office. "Doctor, someone is in the lab." Caleb grabbed his gun and ran to the storage chamber. His precious collection was in chaos. Preservation tanks shattered, faces missing. The power flickered, casting shadows along the steel walls. And then he saw it. A woman stood at the far end of the chamber. Her skin was stitched together from different pieces, a grotesque patchwork of vengeance. It was Naomi. She turned slowly, her lips curling into a smile. "Did you miss me, Doctor?" Then the lights went out, and the screaming began. The guards fired blindly into the darkness. Bullets whizzed past Naomi, but she was faster. One by one, they dropped, their faces ripped off before their bodies even hit the floor. Caleb ran, heart pounding. He locked himself in his private chamber, breath ragged. His phone buzzed. A message. From an unknown number. "How does it feel, Doctor? To be hunted?" He froze. His surveillance cameras flickered. Naomi stood right outside his door, her voice cold as death. "Time to collect your face." The door burst open. Caleb staggered backward, knocking over a tray of surgical tools. The gleaming scalpels and forceps clattered to the floor. Naomi stepped forward, her stitched-together face twisted in a horrifying smirk. "You never expected them to fight back, did you, Doctor?" she whispered. Caleb grabbed a scalpel with trembling fingers. "You think you're some kind of avenger?" His voice cracked. "You're a monster." Naomi tilted her head. "I learned from the best." In a flash, she lunged. Caleb swung the scalpel, but she was faster. She slammed him against the operating table, pinning him down. He struggled, but Naomi pressed the blade to his cheek. "You stole their faces," she hissed. "Their lives, their identities." Caleb's breath hitched as she leaned closer. "Now," she whispered, "I'll take yours." The last thing Caleb saw was the reflection of his own terrified eyes in the scalpel's blade. And then, darkness. Days later, a new surgeon appeared in the underground market. No one questioned his credentials. No one questioned why his movements were eerily familiar. He worked in the shadows, providing the wealthy with fresh faces, just as Dr. Caleb Reed once had. But behind closed doors, he stared at his reflection. And Naomi stared back at him, because it wasn't Caleb anymore. Naomi had taken his face, his name, his identity. She had become him, and the real Caleb. His face, stitched together with the others, hung on the wall like a grotesque trophy. Naomi had taken down the mastermind, but the business wasn't just Caleb. There were others, people who knew what he had done, people who helped him. And one of them, Lana, wasn't going to run. She had barely escaped when Naomi stormed the lab. But unlike the others, she didn't flee to hide. She fled to fight. Lana had lost her sister to Dr. Reed's trade. She knew where the rest of the black market surgeons worked, and she was going to burn them down. Naomi had started the war. Lana would finish it. One by one, the underground face thieves began to disappear. Some were found, their faces ripped off in horrifying displays. Others, they simply vanished, never seen again. Rumors spread. The world whispered of a vengeful ghost, a shadow that hunted those who stole identities. The criminals called her the Burned One because her face was a grotesque patchwork of stolen skin. They thought they could run. They were wrong. Naomi and Lana crossed paths in the ruins of Caleb's old lab. The air was thick with rotting flesh and formaldehyde. Lana aimed a gun at Naomi. "You're no different from them," she spat. Naomi didn't flinch. "I don't steal faces to sell them. I take them back." Lana's grip tightened. "What about the innocent ones?" For the first time, Naomi hesitated. She had never thought about it. Had she gone too far? Had she become what she once hated? The gun's safety clicked off. Naomi took a slow breath. And then she did something Lana didn't expect. She removed her own face. The stitched skin peeled away, revealing the scarred, broken woman underneath. "I was stolen first," Naomi whispered. "I'm just trying to put things right." Lana lowered the gun. The war wasn't over. But maybe it could be. Naomi knew she had to end it for good. She found the last supplier, a powerful politician funding the face trade. One night, she waited in his mansion. When he entered his room, she stepped from the shadows. "You wear stolen faces," she whispered. "Let's see how you look without one." The man screamed, but Naomi didn't flinch. This was justice. And this was the last face she would ever take. Naomi disappeared. The black market trade collapsed. The rumors of the Burned One faded into legend. But somewhere, in a quiet town, a woman with scars lived a simple life. She had finally reclaimed her identity. And for the first time in years, she smiled. In a world obsessed with vanity, people risk everything for perfection. But beauty isn't about stealing what isn't yours. Identity is sacred, and if you take what isn't yours, it will come back to haunt you. The moral lesson of this story is that true identity cannot be stolen or sold. Those who take what isn't theirs will eventually lose themselves.